We're always telling your stories, and it's time someone tells ours. We're humans first, journalists second. We chose this career to give you a voice. Now we're voicing ours. It's true, journalism has much room for improvement, but not all hope is lost, and we want your trust back by humanizing one journalist at a time. We're sharing with you what we go through to bring you the news. The pain, the tears, the trauma, and the mental health struggles. It's painful, and sometimes we even work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But we all have something in common. The passion, the joy, and the love we feel for storytelling and holding the powerful accountable. That includes holding ourselves accountable. So here are stories from us. This is how we want to help improve the news industry. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo. Hi everyone, welcome back to Media Healers and our 3rd season. On this episode, we're going to be speaking to Bricio Segovia. He's a White House correspondent for MBS Noticias in Mexico, and he collaborates with multiple news outlets. He's an award-winning international news anchor and reporter who has worked in the news industry for 2 decades, 20 years, and he has reported the news from more than 30 different countries. He was a White House correspondent for the Spanish service of international broadcaster Voice of America, where he was wrongfully terminated under Trump's administration, according to a lawsuit. Bricio is also a member right now of the White House Correspondents Association and the extended pool of the association. He has interviewed some of the most relevant political figures, including heads of state. He also interviewed the president of Colombia, Duque, in 2019, which his interview actually went viral after Bricio exposed the president for avoiding to answer his questions. And Bricio was also the first journalist to get an exclusive interview with Bolivia's president, Evo Morales, in 2013, after his plane was denied access to airspace in several European countries. He also led the investigation of Bolivia Presos de la Corrupción, or Bolivia's Prisoners of Corruption, which resulted in the dismissal of the corrupted head of the Bolivian jail system in 2013. So an extensive career and very rewarding journalism, Bricio. So congratulations, and it's an honor to have you here with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Emiliana. And when you say that I've been in the industry for 20 years, it kind of looks like I'm super old. I want to believe that I'm a young soul.
You are a young soul. You are a young soul. Bricio, okay, so let's start with the basics. Why and how did you decide to become a journalist?
I'm one of those people that had it very clear since I was very little. But the first thought or memory that I have is me being 7, asking my parents for a microphone for Christmas. And indeed, they gave me a microphone, a red microphone it was a nightmare to them because I was reporting absolutely everything that I saw everywhere, every single minute of the day. As long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a journalist. Maybe I didn't know exactly what to call it at first, but I've always been fascinated by communications and trying to explain people what's going on around me in a way that everyone can understand. And those are the basics of journalism, after all. So, at 16, I started working in radio, and the rest is history. So I've been in the industry for a long time. I've done radio, TV, print, online. Yeah, I could say that I've seen pretty much every aspect of what the industry has to offer, and probably that's why we're here today, Emiliana.
Exactly why we're here today. Okay, so let's before we get into the more challenging aspects of journalism, what is, throughout your whole career, one thing that has really truly shaped you and has made you proud to be a journalist, one experience you've had on the field?
Listen, one of the things that you actually mentioned in my introduction, which is that piece of reporting in Bolivia, where the result of my reporting was the dismissal of the corrupted head of the prison system, the national prison system, and that kind of gives purpose to what we do, which is keeping the people in power accountable. So to me, that it was very meaningful, because my work had an effect on many people. Um, and yeah, it's something that I'm proud of. Not only myself, also the team that we were working together in that documentary. So that's one piece that really stands out in my books.
Yeah, no, I believe you, and I agree. That must have been extremely rewarding, and I can imagine how you felt after seeing that aftermath of your reporting actually take significant action. So that's beautiful. That I think that's why we all decide to be journalists, or one of the main reasons why we all decided to become journalists. Bricio, so now hopping into more challenging stuff. And I have to mention, I know Bricio because we worked together in Washington, D.C. We didn't work in the same organization, but we were colleagues, and we would see each other at the White House all the time. So that's how
All
we
the time.
met, and that's why we're here today. And during my time in Washington, D.C., actually, you went through a very difficult situation with Voice of America. You were one of 30 foreign journalists working with the U.S. Agency for Global Media who was fired by the Trump administration, and you, along with six other colleagues, decided to sue the agency for breach of contract and wrongful termination. One, I want to ask how that's going, and two, how was your experience during that time, and how did it feel to go through that?
Yeah, a lot of the evolution of this case is still ongoing, so I cannot talk in depth about how this is going. But as you mentioned, we were wrongfully terminated. We were the victims of a political campaign of the Trump administration wanting to, kind of say that foreign journalists could potentially be spies, and we were taking the jobs of Americans because of Voice of America, VOA, is actually the international broadcast, the public international broadcaster of the US. So technically, you're working for the government is your employer, right? Even though it's supposed to be an unbiased organization. That definitely didn't happen during the Trump years. Towards the end, it got really bad. Actually, I got the first reaction on this case from the White House. That interview got censored by the agency. So it was terrible. It's something that kind of caused a lot of turmoil in the life of many journalists that were working at VOA at the time. My life, cause of a lot of anxiety, depression. Anyways, basically, because basically a little tiny detail that we didn't mention is they were trying to deport us by not extending our visas. So because we are not U.S. citizens, so basically our future careers, everything depended on the government.
And I believe three of you guys, if I'm not mistaken, were actually deported back to their home countries.
Yeah, exactly. Three colleagues got deported, and yeah, some of them are fighting now in the court. See what happens.
Yeah. Um, y- I remember actually when you interviewed, I can't remember, was it Mauricio, or what was his name?
Yeah, it was Mauricio Claver Carone, who is now the president of the IDB. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you interviewed him, and your interview made it on air and it was then censored, I'm wondering how that made you feel as a journalist, having your work be censored by the Trump administration. What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Uh, wow, it had never happened to me. And I understand as a journalist, I know how the industry works. I know, there are editorial lines. There are certain things, depending on who you work with, you know how the news are going to be delivered or portrayed. I mean, regardless of your reporting, there are always major forces that are going to portray the certain piece of news in a certain way. So but that had never happened to me. And I worked for that was the third um, public international broadcaster I worked for. I worked for France 24, which is the French broadcaster, public broadcaster. I worked for back in the day, I worked for RT, which is a Russian public broadcaster. I didn't get censored by any of those.
Yeah.
And I end up being censored by the US international broadcaster, which it's quite ironic. Their motto is "A free press matters,"
Yeah.
which didn't really matter to them at the time, clearly.
Clearly, it didn't matter to them
Yeah,
in 2019.
yeah,
But I do still believe free press truly matters.
yeah.
So I'm proud of you for your courage during that time to face this very difficult situation and to expose the reality of it, because having the courage to speak out basically against the US government during a Trump administration. I mean, we all told you back then that takes some serious, and I don't want to say balls, but it really
I
does.
did just say it.
But I just said
Yeah,
it
no, but
because it
listen,
really does.
no, but listen back. I guess one of the things that I it really got me thinking when that happened was it was happening, as you mentioned, not just to me, it was happening to other 30 journalists.
Yeah,
We all were being like getting the impact right away of the Trump administration's actions.
yeah,
But there were like other dozens of journalists that eventually this could unfold on more journalists, more than 30, like up to 100, being like their visas revoked and therefore no way to remain in the country. I mean, they could find their very own ways, but we were short in time. So that made it really difficult, especially in the context of a pandemic when embassies, consulates, had a huge backlog. So they couldn't really expedite certain visas. The options were really limited. And what I thought was, listen, we're journalists. We spend the whole day keeping people accountable. Am I not going to do the same thing when this is happening under my own roof? No, because it's happening under my own roof, I need to speak out. And also, I was in a better position than other journalists. I had a long career. I had options to seek a different type of visa on my own. I had the option I got really lucky because my new visa got approved really, really fast. But I just got lucky. Otherwise, I would be speaking to you probably from Spain, from my home country.
yeah,
But I'm from Spain. Worst comes to worst, I could have gone back to my home country where I can enjoy my freedoms. Some people were at risk of losing it all, going back to their home countries. There are countries where definitely freedom is not what defines them. So, or human rights for the matter. So I was really speaking out, not just for me, but specifically for those colleagues who couldn't really speak out at the moment because it would have made the situation even worse for them if they had to go back to their country in the end. So, yeah, and I get that's what journalism is about. And that situation exposed a lot of good journalists working at VOA who kind of like looked at us and defended us and spoke out as well. And some really bad journalists who simply are bureaucrats, sitting on a desk.
yeah. I completely agree. I completely agree. Um, Bricio, aside from that situation, what do you think has been one of the most challenging uh, situations you faced throughout your career? And, how did you go about it, or what tools have you used to kind of cope with it? Because, for example, with this situation at VOA, you mentioned that you went through a lot of personal struggles, including depression. Your mental health took a toll, and part of Media Healers is kind of exposing the very challenging situations we face through covering multiple events.
Yeah, and please allow me to just say here that I applaud you for this project because it's so necessary, and I think that journalists, we always reminded that we don't need to be the centerpiece of story. We are just the observer and the person who explains what's happening in our surroundings. But it's the media scene has gotten so it's horrible at the moment. It really is, and I
It
think part
almost
of
feels
it,
like journalism has lost its way with the corporations.
yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I mean, let's put one thing straight. Like, whenever journalism became a corporation, journalism was killed a little bit. But it gotten worse not only because of the way corporations are putting costs and interests on top of good journalism, but also because of the environment that we see in society. Part of it also was encouraged by the previous administration, I gotta say. Just by saying that everyone who criticized the previous administration was a fake news, right? And that's simply a very populist way of trying to silence um, criticism. So, but also in the way that corporations started to play the same game, and the clickbait kind of way of doing journalism, or just by thinking that everything needs to be breaking news, and that's on CNN, who started, we just started this trend of always having this CNN ticker on the screen, the breaking news ticker on the screen, so that people who just turn in, they would be like, oh, I need to stay because something important is happening. So I keep watching, and that's just a strategy to catch the viewer. And because of that, we don't even know what breaking news is anymore. Because whenever there's a real breaking news, how does that stand out when the whole day is breaking news according to this organizations? So the journalism and the media industry has gotten worse throughout the years. I think we're at a very low point right now. It's been going downhill, I would say, since the financial crisis. That's when many corporations took advantage of the situation by decreasing salaries, like even benefits and so on. And we thought, I remember having conversations back then with colleagues, and like, oh, it's something seasonal. It's going to change. This is going to change when we recover. It's going to get better. It never got better. Quite the opposite. It got worse. And then with the whole multimedia journalist, which is probably the worst invention ever for journalists' mental health, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. Yeah, after the crisis, salaries never got better. They kept getting worse. Journalists who've graduated from the best schools of journalism in the United States don't even make enough money to pay rent, and they have to Uber, which has been the case
Mhm.
of a few colleagues that I've interviewed. And multimedia journalists, obviously, doing the job of five different people in one day is simply a perfect mix for many mistakes being made and very much reporting the issues from the tip of the iceberg and not being able to actually get to the root problems or the root cause.
Listen, let's call things by its name. It's by their name. It's exploitation. I mean, the fact that one person is doing the job of five people, like that's what I call exploitation. I mean, you are a journalist who's supposed to be reporting. At the same time, you are the camera operator. At the same time, you are the sound guy. At the same time, you are the producer. That's already four jobs in one. And at the same time, they want you to have your audience engaged on social media. That's five different jobs that back in the day were full-time jobs. So, I mean, they try to trick us saying that, oh no, times have changed, like everything is multi-platform now. Yeah, but I'm working five times what I used to work when I had a crew. And that to me is exploitation because they want you to do everything. So you have to sacrifice on something. It's very clear and very evident that quality footage is the first sacrifice that in the case of TV they make. Second is sound because, we even, I don't know, like we don't really care about good sound or good footage anymore. We just care about having someone on the spot, right? Which I get, okay. But then this is where things get really, really bad. The base and the foundation of good journalism is information, good sources, good reporting, right? But if you have to be paying attention, is my own focus. You need to go back and forth to see if you are actually, in the frame. You need to like ask favors to people walking around who are not even friends of yours or anything at all, so they can help you because you cannot do everything.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I've seen people doing that, my colleagues doing that. And on top of that, you want me to keep track of all the information as if that was my only job. This is ridiculous. And someone needs to stop it, but no one is going to stop it. And why is no one's going to stop it? Because we have, especially, most of my career, I've done it in the Spanish language field, media industry, especially those countries. What really matters is, okay, how much cheaper can we do this? And this happens here too, right? But we see how this trend of multimedia journalists is really evolving really fast in those countries. We see here in the US in local news specifically, but we even see it in international media outlets now, which is like, it's concerning because it's like, okay, those are the outlets that are supposed to be on top of everything. And now you are getting to that point. What kind of information are we going to be delivering to the people? It's really, really sad. And what's even sadder is that they try to sell this multimedia journalist thing as like something amazing and beautiful that we need to embrace. But I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes being a multimedia journalist is really useful and very essential.
Yeah.
Because, in certain situations, but that shouldn't be the norm. And that's what it is right now.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the norm, 100%. Bricio, I'm wondering, if you have struggled throughout your career with emotional, physical, or mental health, and how you've been able to navigate it or cope through it, and what has led you to experience these hardships.
Absolutely. Well, the problem is that you're not even aware that you're experiencing all that, and that your mental health is being exposed in ways that you're just not aware of it. That's the problem. The problem with, for anyone out there watching this right now, if you're not a journalist, you need to understand that the way our mind works is slightly different to what other people's minds work. We work under constant stress. We work on a constant deadline. Our life is, every single day is a deadline of certain deadlines. So we are used to that. We are used to monitoring information 24/7. We cannot say my shift is 8 hours long. No, you're always working, because for no one gets into journalism to become rich. People get into journalism because it's their passion. So it's your way of living, your way of life. And we that is the first mistake, thinking that that is your way of life, and your job should never be your way of life. Yes, it is better when you love what you do, but when your life is being dictated by your job, then we do have a problem. And my mental health has been exposed when I was a war correspondent, and I was sent to conflicts without the proper training. I wasn't aware of that. I was too excited to think that I was going to be covering something major with many human stories. And that's what I wanted to do, give a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah.
That's one way in which journalists' mental health is exposed nowadays. And back in the day, in my case, now I realize your mental health, my mental health has been exposed by being a foreign correspondent.
And
And
before
yes, yeah.
I mean, before you keep going, I just want to reiterate a huge important point you just made, because journalists are aware of this, but the audience, if they're not a journalist, it might
Mm.
come as a shock to them that a war correspondent was sent to cover war without proper training, but it happens more often than people know.
Oh
Or
yeah.
they're even, yeah, they're even given equipment to protect themselves, like a vest, a body vest
yeah,
that doesn't even fit them to cover
yeah,
certain traumatic events. But
yeah.
and
They can give you a flight jacket if you're lucky. I mean, I was
yeah,
lucky back then because an organization was covering. I mean, I was on the payroll of an organization, so I had like a life insurance and things like that, and they will cover all my expenses. But like there are colleagues who are sent, even now with the whole Ukrainian things. I know of colleagues being sent to the Ukrainian border and these areas where the conflict is boiling, uh, as freelancers. This is this is this is such a shame, because if something happens to these people, obviously they don't get the training. And if they do or they do not, is on them, because they're not part of the organization. But they don't get any benefits. They don't get, if they die, their families don't get anything at all. It's it's how cruel the industry has become. It's always been a very competitive industry and a very cold and cruel industry in a way, but it got to levels that I couldn't even imagine. Like because it's such a passionate uh, job, people just would do it because, as I said, it's you breathe journalism. But the problem is that most of us are not aware when we're doing these things and these things are happening. We're not aware of like how your
how
mental
raw.
health is taking a toll on all these situations. Also, that's an extreme, right? Like a conflict. But even it's as simple as me and many others being a foreign correspondent and being hired as a freelancer, but being demanded uh, responsibilities of a staff journalist. We need to be available 24/7 whenever they want, because if you are not available once, they will move on and find someone else. It's just so it's unfair, because that only makes you be on call 24/7 for clients that are not even permanent clients, and they don't give a about you. So that's when you realize about all this, when you get a second. And it's really, I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but I really realized of everything when there was I'm based in Washington, D.C., right? And I'm a political correspondent now. So I really realized when the Trump administration was over, and then Biden took office, and the whole pace of the news slowed down.
Yeah.
And then I had a second to think.
Yeah.
And and I was like, what am I doing with my life? I mean, why am I allowing this to happen in my life? Why am I mistreating myself? Why am I giving all these corporations the power to control my life? And this is when the crisis starts. And this is when the crisis starts, because all you've done your whole life and all you wanted to do was this job. And then that has guided your life for 2 decades. So what do you do now? You know, and I know I'm not alone. I know this is a crisis that many colleagues are going through right now, at least here in Washington, D.C., because all we needed was a minute or two to think and breathe and process. And then is when you realize, because during the Trump administration, things got really brutal in terms of the pace of the information. We didn't have a second. Everything was on Twitter. You know, like everything, every single day was exhausting. So, you know, like after that, you realize I just needed a second to think.
Yeah. Yeah, the Trump administration was very fast paced, very overwhelming. News was
Yeah.
changing every second of the day. The narrative was changing every second of the day. So journalists truly had to be on point, going live almost every hour or even every 10 minutes, because Trump would tweet out something and the story would change, and that changed your whole piece or the whole news
Yeah.
article that you were about to print.
Now, all of us had the president's tweets as our good morning alarms. You
Literally.
know, like
Literally.
literally, like this is not a joke. So listen, and I'm not complaining about the Trump administration or anything. You know, like this is the business we're in. So this just happened. It happened to happen with Trump.
Right.
But the thing is that in journalism, there are so many red flags that we see every day throughout our careers, and they're getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And because of the way we're built, our minds are built, and we're misguided in the way we think of journalism as a way of living and not just as a job. I think that's why we are more vulnerable eventually. I'm not saying that other people are not, but we're saying I'm speaking as a journalist from my own experience. So then you realize, oh, now I realize about everything. Now I had a second to breathe. Now I realize that everything I've been building on had no foundation. Because if you don't respect yourself, no one else is going to do it. And by allowing the industry to disrespect you continuously, basically your life has no foundation, or maybe I should say your mental health has no foundation. So it gets to a point when you think, okay, now I need to start from scratch and start investing in my mental health, start investing in what kind of life I deserve, what kind of life I really want, and not instead of what kind of life I've been programmed to think I need to do and I need to follow.
Completely agree. I think I couldn't have said it better. And I think that what you were saying about journalists being so passionate about their job and loving this job and believing in this job so much, and in communicating truth to the world and transparency, we are vulnerable, and the industry has found that vulnerability and has taken advantage of it to make us believe that the norm should be that every journalist needs to work 24/7 for low wages and doing 5 jobs in one day at the same time.
No schedule at all. I mean, you know it as well. As a recovering journalist, we, we cannot make plans
We
at
cannot.
all,
We cannot.
ever.
I mean, I never
We
had
cannot send.
plans in
No,
Washington, D.C. I did not.
no, we cannot sign up to classes of any sort because we never know what our schedule is going to look like. And listen, that's also part of the beauty of the industry, not knowing what you're going to do. Everything is an adventure. There's adrenaline all over the place, right? But it gets to a point, again, I think there are two things here, Emiliana. I think one thing is that it gets to a point when you are old enough to realize or experienced enough to realize about the truth of the industry. And there's also a point of maturity in which your priorities change.
Yeah.
Right. So those are two things that play a big role in when you decide to break the rules and be like, okay, I had it, this is it. So yeah, it's just heartbreaking because I do love this. I love journalism, and I truly believe in the need of good journalists. But I just don't know what the future holds to everyone in this industry these days. It's either you decide to be disrespected continuously or constantly, or I don't know, I mean, and of course there are certain companies that are doing their job in a good way, like I don't know, I nowadays work for MVS Radio in Mexico. They're wonderful. If only all companies were like them.
Yeah.
But that's the exception, and obviously money is always the issue in the media industry. And I'm not talking about salaries. It's like having money to invest in good journalism, good projects. In good journalism requires money and investment, and we don't see that very often. And unless your corporation is owned by Jeff Bezos and they can just like throw a bunch of money every single day on whatever you want to do, and even then your reporting is going to be probably affected by the economical and financial interests of the owner of that corporation. So it's yeah, there's no perfect situation, I guess.
Yeah. Bricio, is there anything else that you'd like to share that maybe I haven't asked you before I ask you one final question?
Listen, this I this some of the people watching right now might be future journalists, people who are like studying now journalism, who really hope to build a career in this field. And my message to those people would be, we are in the era where you can build your own brand on social media. There are journalists that have literally more followers than media outlets do, and they can be very powerful. Don't be afraid of creating your very own platform. If the situation gets worse, don't accept shitty salaries and shitty conditions. Just respect yourself. And I know you want to get into industry and that's what you really want to do, but think out of the box. Think out of the box, because you'll thank yourself in the future.
100%, 100%. And lastly, what is one thing that you would change in the news industry? I mean, we've talked about a lot, but something that maybe it needs a lot of attention ASAP to help improve the news industry.
Listen, I think one first step at least for big corporations, is to start having mental health departments. Mm-hmm. We see how burnout is something that it's present in every single newsroom these days at levels we haven't seen in the past. And that's a cause for concern, not only for the for the employees, also for the employers. And they should take it seriously, because it gets to the point when even, as much as you love this craft, as much as you love journalism, there's a point when your mental health decides to abandon you, that you cannot perform. You just can't. And good journalism cannot afford this, cannot afford burnout, cannot afford this crisis we're going out. It's happening now in the industry. And if I were, the big sharks in the industry, I would definitely invest in in mental health advisors, or creating mental health departments for their employees. Not only because, I mean, they can pretend they care, because we know they don't in general,
Yeah.
but they can pretend they care even if they want their journalists to be efficient, because otherwise, it will get to a point when people just decide to quit, and that's it. And maybe they don't want to quit, but that's the only option their mind is giving them when they get to the point of burnout. And I think that's a real crisis these days, among journalists, burnout.
Oh yeah, 100%. And many have quit in the past 2 years. Um, so
Yeah, so many good journalists lost because corporations are being inconsiderate with their with their employees and journalism and society in general, because this is a journalism, it's a social duty. And the second you don't understand that, you shouldn't be in this industry. And many managers in media corporations do not understand this, and they don't deserve their position. They really don't.
yeah.
And yeah, so invest in mental health for your employees, even if you don't care, even if what you want is your corporation to succeed. Be smart and do it, because mark my words, Emiliana, this is only going to get worse. Social media, it's a part of our job these days, and our job is literally 5 jobs, as we've seen in this, in here with you. So it's only going to get worse if the big corporations don't start doing something about this. The other option is like, hey, get out of the system, do your thing, outsmart these corporations. I believe in you. I believe in myself. I believe in you, Emiliana. I mean, you're good proof of this. I mean, this is something that was necessary. You saw it, and here you are doing it. So, we if we are resourceful people. That's what journalists are. So at least we got that.
At least we got that, right? Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I did quit. Obviously, it hasn't been easy if anyone is considering it. But it's a brave decision. And, I'm doing this podcast from my room in my parents' apartment house. So I'm being resourceful. Obviously, um, I think the main drive, I guess, for entrepreneurships like this one, or projects like this one, and leaving the news industry, is the fact that I saw the need, and not only did I see it, I lived it. So I know what it feels, the burnout, the depression, the sadness, the
Mhm.
lack of transparency. And I'm doing this again because I am so passionate about journalism. So I just thought, if I'm giving my life to these corporations for not nearly enough pay, working 24/7, why don't I just do it for myself? And I'm not getting paid right now, but I'm so much happier because I know this is meaningful, and I know that just sitting here speaking to you and listening to your own experiences has validated so many of my own experiences, and it's so healing. And if this interview touches just one life and helps improve just one life in journalism, then to me it's just worth it.
Yeah, and if there's one piece of advice that needs to stick in your mind, is don't let it get to the point of burnout, because that's a point of no return. It's really hard to go back after your burnout. And the only way to be aware of that, this is the sad truth, is that it's really hard to be aware of that unless you've developed some emotional intelligence. And the only way to develop emotional intelligence is by, hey, shocker, going to a therapist. So yeah,
Ding, ding, ding.
yeah, Ling, ling, ling. So
Yeah.
it's the way to put things into perspective. And I started going to the therapist because I wasn't happy, and I didn't know why I wasn't happy. I had a job that I love. I had a partner, I had, a roof, under which I could live. I mean, I had money to buy food and the essentials, and I still wasn't happy. And I was like, what's wrong? Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. And then it's when I started to discover that I hadn't been respecting, I had been disrespecting myself by letting other people disrespect me as a professional, because of all the things that we explained here today. So don't get to that point. And if you, anything of what I said or Emiliano said, it kind of raised a red flag to you, maybe it's time to focus on yourself and taking care of your mental health, because it's no joke.
Exactly. Yeah, be mindful of those red flags and then take care of yourself. I love that. Bricio, it has been an honor having you here. It has been such a pleasant, transparent, and truthful conversation. And I have zero doubt that this will generate an impact in many journalists' lives, because the way you spoke about the industry, about your struggles, and how you've managed to cope through it and reevaluate what you deserve in your life and how you deserve to be treated as a journalist and respected and honored for the job that you do. I mean, you're living proof that journalism is meaningful when we have the resources to do it the right way. You literally had an impact in a country with one of the stories that you told, and you've made an impact in many different communities with the stories that you've told throughout your career. So I thank you for being an example of what great journalism looks like. I mean, I worked with you in DC, and you were just amazing and wonderful at what you do. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for agreeing to speak out and to be here with me today.
Always a pleasure. And one of the beautiful things about the industry is the human connections that prevail, no matter how tough times might get. And this is a good example. So it's always a pleasure talking to you, Emiliana, and seeing you.
You too, Bricio. Thank you. Journalists, this one's for you, to help you heal, to help you understand your worth, and to help you know you're not alone. So share the love and subscribe to Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on Instagram. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo.